A billionaire was eating dinner alone when a breaking news segment stopped her cold. On the screen, a black man stood on a frozen sidewalk in Philadelphia, his two kids pressed against his sides, everything they owned piled behind them on the concrete like storm debris. He had just been evicted. It wasn't the man's silence that froze her. It wasn't the little boy sitting on a garbage bag. It wasn't the neighbors filming from across the street. It was the address on the screen. Because that building belonged to her. And what she was about to uncover inside her own empire would shatter everything she believed about the woman she'd become. 42-year-old Vivian Foster, CEO of Foster Meridian Properties, 6 cities, 14,000 rental units, $2.6 billion, had just watched her own system destroy a family in real time. And the worst part hadn't happened yet. Vivian Foster's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower on Lakeshore Drive, Italian marble that had never seen a home-cooked meal. The dining table seated 14. In 4 years, not once had every chair been filled, but every night the housekeeper set 2 places. The housekeeper had started doing it 7 years ago, the week after Aldridge Foster died, and Vivian had never told her to stop. She'd sit down, look at the empty plate across from her, clean fork, folded napkin, water glass filled to exactly the same height as her own, and eat. Every night, across from a ghost. She told herself it was habit. She was 42. Her signature appeared on contracts that determined where thousands of families would live and under what conditions they could be removed. But Vivian Foster had never walked the hallway of a building she owned. Never met a single tenant. Not one. She didn't need to. That's what systems were for. Tenants weren't names in her world. They were line items. They either performed or they didn't. If they can't pay, they made bad choices. That's not my problem to solve. She said it to her board, to herself late at night, when the penthouse felt too large and the lake outside looked like a black mirror reflecting nothing back. She said it because her father had said it first. Aldridge Foster started with a single building on the south side, 12 units into 1,200, all before Vivian graduated college. Aldridge didn't believe in sentiment. He believed in leases. Sentiment is a luxury landlords can't afford, girl. The moment you feel sorry for people who can't pay rent, you stop being an owner and start being a fool. Vivian had carried those words like scripture for 20 years, and it had worked. The empire quadrupled after her father's death. Investors were happy. Vivian told herself she was happy too. But happiness doesn't echo, and that penthouse echoed constantly. She ate dinner alone that February evening. Channel 7 was on. She wasn't watching. The TV existed the way the dining table existed, to fill a space that would otherwise remind her how empty the room was. Her phone buzzed. Board prep. She scrolled with one hand and ate with the other. And then the anchor said the word eviction, and Vivian Foster's life split in half. A street, winter, Philadelphia, the ticker said. She almost looked away. Then the camera shifted. A man stood on the curb in a thin navy hospital windbreaker, a jacket designed for a climate-controlled hallway, not a February wind off the Delaware. A hospital badge still clipped to his chest. He'd come straight from a shift, and nobody had told him what was waiting for him. Behind him, everything he owned, a mattress against a fire hydrant, garbage bags splitting at the seams, a framed photograph face down on the concrete, glass cracked across one corner, and two children. A girl, maybe 10, school backpack still strapped to her shoulders, arms crossed tight. Her hair in two neat braids, precise and careful, clearly done by hand that morning by somebody who cared very much about how she showed up to the world. A boy, maybe 6, sitting on a garbage bag like it was a chair, a plastic dinosaur in one fist, eyes too wide and too calm for what was happening. The reporter's voice cut through. Marcus Bell, a 36-year-old hospital transport aide, was evicted this morning after falling 2 months behind on rent. Bell, a single father of 2, lost his position at a community hospital 4 months ago during budget cuts. He says he contacted his property management company 11 times requesting an extension. He says none of his calls were returned. Vivian set down her fork. Something in the man's posture held her. Not collapse, not performance. Stillness. The stillness of a man who had fought every fight available to him, and lost every one, and was now standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out which direction to walk with 2 children, and no car. The camera panned to the building, a number above the entrance, 1847. Vivian didn't blink. This building is part of the Foster Meridian portfolio, one of the largest residential holdings in the country, owned by billionaire developer Vivian Foster. Her fork hit the plate. The sound of metal on porcelain rang through the penthouse like a bell in an empty church. She walked to the laptop. Her legs moved before her brain gave permission. 1847, Kensington Avenue. The screen loaded. Unit 312. Tenant, Marcus Bell. Lease start, March 2019. Monthly rent, $1,150. Payment history scrolled down like a heartbeat monitor. Green, 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 green. 58 months of green. On time. Every single one. Then, November, red. December, red. Eviction filed. January 14th. Eviction executed. February 3rd. 2 red marks after 58 green ones. 6 weeks from missed payment to homeless. 6 weeks to erase 5 years of a man proving, month after month, that he was exactly who he said he was. Her building, her tenant, her system, her fault. On the screen, the reporter had moved closer. She held the microphone out, and Marcus Bell looked at it the way a man looks at a thing that's about to hurt him. And then she asked it, not cruelly. She didn't mean it cruelly. That's what made it worse. Mr. Bell, where's the children's mother? The sidewalk went quiet. Vivian watched a man's face do something she had never seen a face do. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. He closed, like a door easing shut on a room nobody was allowed into. He looked past the reporter, past the camera, at nothing. In the ground, he said. 3 years ago. Flat. No inflection. The way you say a thing you've said to yourself 10,000 times in the dark, so you can say it out loud without breaking. Anything else? She didn't have anything else. Behind him, the little girl, Simone, the Chiron said, reached over without looking and took her brother's hand. She didn't look at her father. She didn't look at the camera. She just stared straight ahead like a soldier at attention. 10 years old. And she already knew that when the questions started, her job was to hold the little one. Vivian rewound it. She didn't decide to. Her thumb just moved. She watched the door swing shut again and again. In the ground, 3 years ago, Vivian Foster sat in a 3-floor penthouse, with a plate set across from her for a father who'd been dead 7 years. And she understood, with a clarity that felt like something snapping in her chest, that she had never once, in 20 years, imagined that the people on the other side of her contracts had lives, not situations, not circumstances, lives with graves in them. Then, because she was still enough of her father's daughter to look for cover, she did what everybody does. She scrolled down. The comments were already there. Hundreds. It had been on air for 11 minutes. Why isn't he working? Sounds like excuses. There's always more to the story. Always. Probably drugs. Just being real. Where's the mother? Nobody's asking the real question. 2 kids and no plan. This is what happens. He looks angry. I'd have evicted him too. Vivian read them, with the tenant file still open in the other tab. 58 consecutive on-time payments. 4 years and 10 months of a man paying on time while working overnight shifts and burying his wife and raising 2 children alone. And here was the internet, in 11 minutes, deciding he was a liar. Nobody asked about the 11 unreturned calls. Nobody asked who owned the building. They asked what he had done wrong. Because it was easier. Because if he'd done something wrong, then the sidewalk made sense. And if the sidewalk made sense, it could never, ever happen to you. And Vivian Foster, sitting in the dark in a glass tower, realized something that would keep her awake all night. The eviction machine wasn't just the software. The eviction machine was the story people told themselves afterward, and she had been running both of them for 20 years. Before we go any further, this channel is brand new, and every single subscribe is what keeps stories like this alive. It's free, it takes 1 second, and it means more than you'll ever know. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell us where in the world you're watching from, and let's get back to it. Vivian was 14 when her father took her to a building on 63rd Street. January. A hallway that smelled like mildew and cooking grease. On the 2nd floor, a family was being moved out, but it wasn't a woman in the doorway. It was a man. Big guy. Work boots. A baby in the crook of one arm, a duffel bag in the other hand. 2 older kids on the stairs behind him, not talking. And the man was crying. Not loud, not shaking. Just standing in his own doorway, with tears running into his collar, while he tried to work out how to carry a baby and a bag down a flight of stairs at the same time. Vivian stopped. Can't we help them? Aldridge didn't slow down. He put a hand on his daughter's shoulder and kept walking. You feel sorry. Good. That means you're human. Now, learn to stop. And that one right there, the crying man, that's the one that'll get you. And there was something almost gentle in his voice, which was the worst part. Because you're a girl, Vivian, and one day you're going to be a woman signing these papers, and every man in that hallway is going to expect you to be softer than I am. They'll count on it. He kept walking. So, you're going to have to be harder, twice as hard. Otherwise, they'll eat you. Vivian looked back over her shoulder. The man's eyes came up and met hers for half a second. Then her father's hand tightened, and they turned the corner. That moment didn't haunt Vivian. That was the problem. She let it teach her exactly what her father intended. Stop feeling, start counting. And she was very good at it. She spent 20 years as the only woman in every boardroom she walked into, and learned early that the fastest way to stop being underestimated was to be the coldest person at the table. Foster doesn't blink. After Aldrich died, Vivian didn't grieve by slowing down. She grieved by accelerating. She automated rent collection, late fees, eviction filings. No exceptions, no conversations, no faces. She contracted Pinnacle Property Group to manage Philadelphia, 47 buildings. She signed in Chicago without ever visiting one. She never asked what happened to families who fell behind. The margins were healthy. She'd built an empire designed to never let her see the people inside it. Until a news camera forced her to look. At 1:40 in the morning, she opened Pinnacle's internal case log for Unit 312. She expected paperwork, timestamps, boilerplate. She got 3 lines. Tenant non-responsive to payment reminders. Male tenant, aggressive demeanor. Communication discontinued. Standard eviction protocol initiated. Unit scheduled for turnover and market rate relisting. Vivian read it twice. Non-responsive. Marcus Bell called 11 times. The reporter said it on air. Aggressive demeanor. Vivian sat very still. She'd spent 20 years reading documents. She knew what a document did. It didn't just record a thing. It decided a thing. A document was a machine for turning somebody's guess into somebody else's permanent fact. She had been called things in files too. Difficult, emotional, not a culture fit. Different words, smaller stakes, a world of difference. But she knew exactly how a single adjective could follow a person into every room they ever walked into again. Once aggressive went into that file, it stopped being an opinion. It became the reason. She picked up the phone and called Pinnacle's after-hours line. "This is Vivian Foster. I want the lobby security footage from the Broad Street office, December 9 through the 19th. On my email before 9 a.m. A pause. This is not a request." It was on her email by 7:14. She watched it in a hotel room in Center City, having taken the 6 a.m. flight, having slept 90 minutes, having packed nothing. Grainy. Fixed camera. Timestamp burned into the corner. December 16th, 9:02 a.m. Marcus Bell walks in, still in his hospital uniform, straight from a night shift. He signs in, speaks to the receptionist for about 40 seconds. She points at the row of chairs. He sits down. 10, 15. He's sitting. He takes off his badge, turns it over in his hands, puts it back on. 10:52. He stands, walks to the desk, says something, sits back down. 11:30. He's taken out a folded piece of notebook paper and he's reading it. Small, careful handwriting, filling the page edge to edge. A man who had written down everything he needed to say because he knew he'd get exactly one shot at saying it. 11:58. He's sitting, 2 hours in a lobby chair after a 12-hour overnight shift in a building where nobody was ever going to come get him. At 12:04, Marcus Bell stands. He folds the paper. He walks to the desk and sets it down on the counter. He doesn't slam it. He doesn't raise his voice. Vivian checked the audio log. No incident report. No security call. Nothing. He says something that takes 4 seconds, and he walks out. That's the whole file. 2 hours of silence and a folded piece of paper. Aggressive demeanor. Vivian Foster closed the laptop and put her face in her hands. Because aggressive wasn't a description. Aggressive was a decision somebody made the second Marcus Bell walked through the door. Before he opened his mouth, before he sat down, before he waited. 2 hours in a chair, like a man waiting to hear how bad it was. Somebody looked at him and wrote a word. And the word had a color. And Vivian Foster's company had built the file, funded the file, signed the contract that made the file possible, and cashed the check when Unit 312 got relisted at market rate 3 weeks later. She told the driver to stop 2 blocks short. She wanted to walk. She needed to feel the distance between her world and the one she'd been profiting from. The buildings got shorter. The sidewalks got rougher. A bus stop bench with the backrest torn off. Vivian walked through all of it in a charcoal cashmere overcoat and leather boots that had never touched a surface rougher than polished marble. She looked like a woman who had taken a very wrong turn. And in a way, she had. 20 years ago, 1847 Kensington Avenue. 5 stories, 48 units. Fire escapes rusted through in 3 places. 2 third-floor windows covered with cardboard and duct tape. The front door was propped open with a cinder block. Because the lock had been broken so long, nobody bothered reporting it anymore. Vivian stared at a building she owned, a building generating $420,000 a year, a building she had never once visited. She walked in. The hallway was dark, not dim, dark. 3 of 4 overhead lights dead. The elevator had an out-of-order sign taped to it, the tape yellow with age. Vivian took the stairs. The railing wobbled under her grip. The exact same wobble in a different building, 28 years later. She knocked on the first door. No answer. She knocked on the second. A chain rattled. The door opened 3 inches. An elderly woman peered through the gap, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Can I help you?" Not friendly, not hostile. Careful. The careful of somebody who'd learned that strangers in nice coats usually meant trouble. "My name is Vivian," she said. She left off the last name. "I work with the ownership group." Odessa studied her a long moment, took in the coat, the boots, the face, then opened the door wider. "Come in, then. I got plenty to show you." Odessa Harmon, 71, Unit 204, 12 years. "Heat's been broke 3 weeks," she said, leading her into a living room where a space heater hummed. "In February, I called Pinnacle 6 times. Nobody came. They only send letters about rent. Never anything else, just rent." The ceiling above the kitchen had a brown stain spreading outward like a slow explosion. A gap in the window frame was stuffed with a rolled-up towel. $1,150 a month. This was what that money was buying. Not maintenance, not safety, not dignity. Just extraction. "Did you know Marcus Bell?" Vivian asked. Unit 312. Odessa's expression softened and hardened at the same time. "Know him?" She sat down heavily. "That man raised those babies by himself. 3 years. His wife passed, car accident on Roosevelt Boulevard, coming home from her own shift. And I never once heard that man complain. Not once. Worked nights. Come home, 8:30 in the morning, dead on his feet. And you know what he'd do before he slept? Vivian shook her head. He'd braid that girl's hair. Vivian didn't say anything. Every morning, before school, sat her on a kitchen chair and braided with those big hands, and I know for a fact he taught himself off the internet because I heard him through the wall for a month talking back to a video. Now cross the left strand under. She shook her head slowly, came off a 12-hour shift, and learned to braid hair off a phone so his daughter wouldn't go to school looking like she didn't have a mother. She looked up, her eyes were wet, and her voice went hard. And then he'd knock on my door every morning just to check I was still breathing. Every single morning for 3 years. She wiped her face fast once, like she was annoyed at it. He didn't deserve what they did to him. She looked right at Vivian, and then she said the thing that went through her like a nail. You know what he told me once. Said if he was a mother out here doing this alone, people'd call him a hero. Said because he's a father, they just wait for him to fail. Odessa's jaw set. We pay our rent, we keep our heads down, and they treat us like the building matters and the people inside it don't. Vivian stood in the dark hallway afterward and pressed her back against the wall. Not a portfolio, not a spreadsheet. A building where a 71-year-old woman stuffed towels into window frames to survive February. Vivian Foster had built her empire from the top down. She had never once looked at it from the bottom up. She drove straight to Pinnacle's regional office. No appointment. Gary Whitmore came out 7 minutes later, mid-50s, thinning hair, a smile trained in customer service seminars. He didn't know about the newscast. He just saw a billionaire client and started sweating. Miss Foster, what an unexpected... Walk me through your eviction process. They sat in a conference room with fluorescent lights and a whiteboard covered in property codes. Gary pulled it up like a sales pitch. Rent due the 1st, grace period through the 5th, late fee day 6, $75 per day. Per day. It's industry standard. It's within legal limits. Vivian stood up, walked to the whiteboard, and picked up a marker. And Gary Whitmore watched a billionaire do 6th grade arithmetic on his conference room wall. $75 times 30 days equals $2,250. Rent owed, $1,150. Total at day 30, $3,400. Vivian stared at it. He missed 1 month of rent, she said quietly. And 30 days later, he owed the equivalent of 3. The fees are disclosed in the... He was never going to climb out of that. Vivian turned around. That's not a late fee, Gary. A late fee makes somebody pay faster. This makes it mathematically impossible for them to catch up. She tapped the board. We didn't punish him for being late. We punished him for being poor. And then we billed him for the privilege. Gary said nothing. Pull up his file. Gary typed. Read from the screen, the way you read a parking ticket. Unit 312. Non-payment. November, December. Eviction filed January 14th. Executed February 3rd. Standard protocol. It says he was aggressive. That's a note from the intake team. I have the lobby footage. The room went very quiet. He sat in a chair for 2 hours, Vivian said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't bang on a desk. He left a handwritten letter on your counter, and he walked out. She leaned forward. Where is that letter, Gary? Gary clicked, scrolled, clicked again. There's There's no scanned attachment in the file, so somebody threw it away. Miss Foster, with respect. Gary spread his hands. We follow the protocols agreed upon in our management contract. The same contract your team approved and signed. We process over 800 units in this region. We can't make individual exceptions without compromising operational efficiency. And there it was, the sentence Vivian had been circling since the fork hit the plate. The contract your team approved. The system you paid us to run. Gary waited for the explosion. That never came. Because Vivian wasn't angry at Gary Whitmore. Gary was doing exactly what he'd been hired to do. Exactly what the contract specified. Can't, Gary said. Vivian heard it differently now. Won't? She had built that system, signed the contract, cashed the checks. She hadn't just watched an eviction on the news. She had funded it. For companies like Pinnacle, eviction isn't a last resort. It's a business tool. Remove a tenant paying below market. Renovate minimally. Relist higher. Turnover isn't a failure of the system. Turnover is the system. And the people who own the buildings never see it. Because they're not supposed to. Vivian left without another word. Is there a family shelter near Broad Street? Grace Covenant Church. 40 beds, currently housing 61 people. She took off her overcoat and left it on the seat. The watch, too. None of it would fool anybody, and she got out of the car anyway. Because the coat felt like armor. And where she was going, armor was the wrong thing to wear. The shelter was in the church basement. Cots in rows like a field hospital. It didn't take long to find him. Marcus Bell was in the far corner, not on a cot, on the floor, back against cinder block, still in hospital scrubs. He'd gone in the morning after the eviction, because the hospital was the only place left that still expected him. Andre was asleep, with his head in his father's lap, one fist wrapped around a plastic dinosaur. Simone sat on a folding chair in front of Marcus, facing away, and Marcus had her hair in his hands. He was braiding it. His eyes were half closed with exhaustion. His hands were enormous and rough, and moving very slowly. Crossed the left strand under, crossed the right strand under, and his lips were moving slightly. Like a man who had to say the steps out loud to keep from losing the thread. His son was asleep on his leg, so he couldn't shift his weight. And he kept braiding. They'd lost their home 18 hours ago. There was no reason on God's earth for that girl's hair to be done in the morning, and he was doing it anyway. Vivian Foster stood in the doorway of a homeless shelter and understood, with a force that nearly took her legs out from under her, that she had never in her life seen anything as careful as what was happening in that corner. She had run 6 cities. She had never once done anything with the attention that man was giving his daughter's hair. She waited until Marcus tied off the second braid. Marcus saw her coming from 20 feet away. His eyes tracked the whole distance, the boots, the coat she'd left in the car and was still somehow wearing, the bare wrist where a watch had obviously been, reading her the way Vivian read balance sheets. Quickly, without sentiment. Can I help you? Not a question. A boundary. My name is Vivian. I saw what happened on the news. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do. Marcus looked at her a long moment, then went back to the hair, checking the part with his thumb. If you came here to feel sorry for me, don't sit down. He tucked a loose strand. If you came here with a job, sit down. I Then don't sit down. But Vivian stayed standing there, and Marcus, after a minute, let her. Not an invitation, just an absence of dismissal. 51, Marcus said eventually, to nobody. Applications. Since September. He tied off the braid. Got 4 interviews. You want to know the questions? First one's always the same. Who watches your kids? They're not allowed to ask that. It's illegal. So they say, tell us about your availability. And I say, I can do nights. I did nights for 6 years. And they say, and there's no issues with coverage? He laughed. It was not a laugh. Coverage. That's the word. He looked up at Vivian for the first time. And then there's the second question. Every single one of them, Marcus said. 4 for 4. Do you have any prior convictions we should be aware of? Vivian opened her mouth. Hold on. Before you tell me that's a standard question, I know it's on the form. It's on everybody's form. He held up one finger. But they don't ask it out loud to everybody. I checked the box. No. And then they sit across from me and ask me out loud anyway. 4 for 4. And I got a buddy. White guy. Same floor. Laid off the same day. 6 interviews. Nobody's said the word conviction to him once. Marcus turned back to his daughter's hair, checking it, though it was already done. So I gotta walk in there and prove I can pay rent, and prove I can be a father, and prove I'm not a criminal. 3 jobs, and I ain't even got the one yet. My wife used to say, Renee. She used to say, baby, you always gotta be twice as good. And I'd tell her, that's fine. I'll be twice as good. He looked at Vivian, but nobody ever told me I'd have to be twice as good at not being what they'd already decided I was. And Vivian Foster, who had been told by her own father in a stairwell at 14 that she'd have to be twice as hard or they'd eat her, could not think of a single thing to say. Because she knew that sentence. She had lived inside a version of it her whole adult life. And she had spent 20 years making sure it never cost her anything, while running a company that charged this man everything for it. If this story has you locked in, take 1 second, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell us down in the comments what you would have done if you were Vivian, standing in that doorway. More stories every week on Recorded Dad Stories. She came back the next day, left groceries with a volunteer, brought a winter coat for Andre and shoes for Simone because she'd noticed the girl walked with a limp, a hole in the left sole she'd been stuffing with folded napkins. She didn't make a speech. She just showed up, left things, and sat. Simone warmed up first. She showed her the drawings, fish mostly. She was 10, and she'd decided she was going to be a marine biologist, and she said it the way other people announce their own names. But there was something else in every single drawing, small and careful in the background. A house, a square with a triangle on top, a door with a handle. The most basic architecture of safety, drawn over and over by a child who no longer had one. Andre was shy, wouldn't look at her, hid behind his father's leg for 2 days. Then, on the 3rd visit, he climbed onto the bench beside Vivian without a word, dug through the box of broken crayons, and held one out. You can have the blue one. Vivian took it. Blues for the sky, Andre said, and went back to his drawing. Vivian Foster sat in a church basement, holding half a blue crayon, and couldn't make her fingers stop shaking. She didn't know why a 6-year-old giving her a broken crayon felt heavier than a $200 million acquisition. But it did. It was Simone who broke her. Not with a word, with a plate. Dinner was at 5:30. Trays. A hotline. Vivian was in the back, stacking chairs, because she'd discovered that standing around being a billionaire was unbearable, and stacking chairs was not. Marcus took his plate, mashed potatoes, some kind of chicken, a roll, and did something so fast and so smooth, Vivian almost missed it. He took the chicken off his own plate and put it on Andre's. Then he took the roll and put it on Simone's. He did it mid-sentence, while talking, like a magic trick he'd done 1,000 times. And then he ate the potatoes. That was dinner. A grown man coming off a 12-hour shift, eating a scoop of mashed potatoes. And Simone, 10 years old with the roll sitting in front of her, watched him do it. She didn't say anything. She waited. She waited until her father turned to answer something, Andre asked. And then she reached across the table, quick and quiet, and put the roll back on his plate, and pulled her hand back and folded her hands in her lap, and looked straight ahead. And by the time he turned around, she was just sitting there like nothing had happened. Marcus looked at his plate. Then he looked at his daughter. She didn't look at him. She was very busy being 10 years old and looking at absolutely nothing. And Marcus Bell, who hadn't cried on television, who hadn't cried in a lobby, who hadn't cried when they put his wife in the ground 3 years ago in front of 2 babies who needed him not to. Marcus Bell put his hand over his mouth and got up from the table and walked into the corridor by the bathrooms. Vivian followed. She wasn't invited. She found him, with his forehead against the cinder block, and both hands pressed over his face, and the sound coming out of him wasn't crying. It was worse. It was the sound of a man trying to cry silently because there were 2 children 40 feet away who could not, under any circumstances, be allowed to hear it. 3 days, Marcus said into his hands. He didn't turn around. He knew someone was there, and he didn't care anymore. She's been doing it 3 days. I didn't even... He stopped, breathed. She's 10. She's not supposed to be watching whether I eat. Vivian stood 4 feet behind him and said nothing, because there was nothing, because, and somewhere very far back in her head, in a stairwell on 63rd Street, her father was saying, "That's the one that'll get you." He'd been right. That was the horror of it. He'd just never once considered that it might be worth fixing. "I got one job," Marcus said. "One, since Renee died. I got one job, and it ain't the hospital." He turned around, and his face was wrecked and furious and absolutely clear. "My job is to be the wall. That's it. Everything comes at us. It hits me first. They don't see it. They don't feel it. They don't carry it." He pointed back toward the dining room. "And that little girl just gave me her bread." His voice cracked straight down the middle, which means the wall came down, which means she's carrying it, which means I failed at the only thing I do. Vivian Foster didn't sleep that night. She sat at the 14-seat dining table at 4 in the morning, the second place setting still across from her, and pulled every eviction filing her company had executed in the last 24 months. 847 families removed from buildings that bore her name on the deed. She read the notes, the free text fields at the bottom of each case where property managers typed whatever they felt like, because nobody above them had ever read a word of it. Tenant became agitated. Tenant was confrontational. Tenant has an attitude problem. Tenant aggressive. She ran a search on that last word. Aggressive. 194 hits. She cross-referenced the names against demographic data her own compliance department had collected for federal reporting and had never once been asked to analyze. Of the 194 tenants described as aggressive, 161 were black men, 83%. Then she ran. One more search, and this one she almost didn't finish because she already knew. Households headed by a single father, 211 of the 847. Not one of them had been offered the hardship extension program that her company advertised on its own website. In a blue box, on the front page, under the words, "We're here to help." Not one, because the extension required a caseworker referral, and the caseworkers sat in family services offices open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, which was exactly when men like Marcus Bell were at work. The entire safety net had been built with a hole in it, precisely the shape of a working father. At 5:04 a.m., Vivian Foster called her general counsel. "Freeze every eviction proceeding in the portfolio," she said. "All 6 cities. All of them. Effective now. Vivian, that's 14,000 units. That's not a—" "All of them," she said. "Today. And get me the Pinnacle contract. The whole thing. Every page." The problem was that Marcus Bell found out who she was. Of course he did. Vivian had been showing up at a shelter for 3 days in a coat that cost more than the shelter's monthly food budget, asking questions like somebody who could do something about the answers. On the 4th morning, Marcus was waiting by the vending machine. "Foster Meridian Properties," Marcus said. "That's you." Vivian didn't insult him by pretending. "Yes, you own it. 1847 Kensington. I own it." Marcus nodded slowly, and it was the nod of a man confirming something ugly he had already decided was true. "So you're the one." "I'm the one. You put my kids on a sidewalk in February." Vivian didn't move. "Yes." And Marcus Bell laughed, one flat, ugly, unamused sound. "You think showing up here makes you different. You're not different. You're a tourist. That's fair. I know it's fair. I don't need you to approve it being fair." He stepped closer. "You came down here to feel something, to feel bad, and then you're going to go home and feel better and tell yourself you're a good person now and none of it costs you a thing. But I gotta stay here. My son's got a cough that's been going 4 days. My daughter's stopped eating, so I'll eat. And you get to leave." Vivian took it, and every word of it was true. "You want to know what you can do for me? Nothing. You don't fix a man by feeling sorry for him." And then, from 4 feet behind her father, a small voice said, "Daddy?" Simone was standing in the doorway in a coat 2 sizes too big. She looked at Vivian. She looked at her father's face. And with the terrible, surgical clarity of a 10-year-old who has been paying attention to everything. "Did she take our house?" The corridor went completely still. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. And Simone Bell, 10 years old, 3 days into a shelter, hair still holding the braid her father had learned off a YouTube video at 1 in the morning, because her mother wasn't there to teach him. Simone looked directly at Vivian Foster and said, "Then why is she still standing here?" Vivian didn't answer that either. She went home instead. And she did the only thing she'd ever known how to do. She sat down and worked. Except this time it was a letter. 6 hours. 11 drafts. The first 10 were garbage, because the first 10 were about her. The 11th wasn't. She had it hand-delivered the next morning. Mr. Bell, you're right. I'm a tourist. You don't owe me anything, and there's nothing I can say that fixes what I did to your children. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, and you can do whatever you want with it. Your apartment is not being re-rented. It's being held. It's yours. Not as a gift, not as charity, and I'm not paying your rent. I know you'd have thrown it back at me, and you'd have been right to. Your lease is being restored at the rate you were paying. The 2 missed months are voided. Not forgiven. Voided because they should never have been charged. You were billed $340 in late fees on $1,100 of rent. That is theft, and I own the company that did it. You pay your rent, same as you did for 58 months straight. I'm just giving you back the door. V. Foster. Marcus read it standing up in the hallway twice. Then he folded it in half, put it in his coat pocket, and said nothing to anybody for about an hour. Then he went and found his kids. Vivian walked through the stripped-bare Unit 312 with a contractor, and the first thing she noticed was the height marks, pencil lines on the doorframe, little dates beside them. Simone 6, Simone 7, Simone 8, Andre 4, and then, in different handwriting, a woman's handwriting, careful and round, Renee. Because why should the kids have all the fun and a date 3 years and 2 months ago? Vivian stood in front of that doorframe for a long, long time. We'll sand that down and repaint, the contractor said. Whole frame? No, Vivian said. Sorry, you will not touch that doorframe. She turned around. Everything else. Floors, windows, the heating, the wiring, the mold in the bathroom that's been there. She checked the clipboard. 11 months, according to 4 separate maintenance requests that nobody answered. Fix all of it, she pointed. That frame stays exactly as it is. If a single pencil mark gets damaged, I will fire everyone in this room. They gave Marcus the keys on a Thursday. Vivian wasn't going to come up. She'd stood in the lobby of her own building for 10 minutes, arguing with herself about it. Marcus called her back. Nah, you come up. You need to see this. So Vivian Foster, $2.6 billion, 14,000 units, not one hallway she'd ever walked. Walked the hallway of 1847 Kensington Avenue. 3rd floor, Unit 312. Marcus unlocked the door and pushed it open, and the kids went past him like water breaking a dam. And Andre made a sound Vivian had never heard a child make before, a kind of shriek of pure disbelief. And Simone ran straight to the doorframe and put her hand flat on it and just held it there. And Marcus Bell stood in the doorway of his own apartment and did not go in. He put his hand on the deadbolt, and he turned it, click. He turned it back, click. He locked it again, click. And Vivian stood in the corridor, watching a grown man lock and unlock his own front door. Over and over, 11 times, standing in the doorway, not going in yet, not saying anything, just click, listening to the sound of a door that belonged to him. On the 11th one, he stopped. He kept his hand on it. 3 days, he said, without turning around. That's all it took. For what? For my son to stop asking when we're going home. His voice was very level. 3 days, and he just stopped asking. Kids figure it out fast. He turned the bolt one more time. Click. He's gonna ask again now, Marcus said. Tonight, he's gonna say, "Can we go home?" And I'm gonna get to say, "We are home." He finally looked at Vivian. You know how long I've been waiting to say a sentence like that. Vivian Foster terminated Pinnacle's contract on a Monday. All 14,000 units, 6 cities, gone in a single email. Gary Whitmore called 11 times. Vivian took the 11th. You're making a mistake, Whitmore said. You know what our collection rate is? 96%. Nobody in this market. You wrote the word aggressive in a file about a man who sat in a lobby for 2 hours without saying one word. I watched the footage. He didn't raise his voice a single time. Silence on the line. Your collection rate is 96%, Vivian said, because you are very, very good at removing people. That's not a business. That's just a machine with the safety off. She hung up. Then she wrote 4 new rules, and they went into every lease Foster Meridian signed from that day forward. 1. No eviction may be initiated on a tenant with 12 or more consecutive on-time payments without a documented hardship review, in person, by a human being, with a name. 2. Late fees are capped at 5% of monthly rent, not compounding, not stacking. Ever. 3. Hardship appointments must be available outside standard business hours, evenings and weekends, because a safety net you can only reach by losing your job is not a safety net. 4. No subjective descriptor may be entered into a tenant file. Not aggressive, not hostile, not has an attitude. You may record what a person did. You may not record how you felt about them. Rule 4 was the one the lawyers fought hardest. Rule 4 was the one Vivian refused to move on by a single word. 14 months later, the numbers came in. Evictions, down 78%. Retention, up 34%. And the one that made the board go quiet, the one nobody predicted, net operating income, up 41%. Because removing a family costs money. Vacancy, turnover, legal filings, releasing, repairing an apartment stripped to nothing. All of it costs money. And keeping a man who has paid you on time for 58 consecutive months, that costs nothing at all. Aldridge Foster had been wrong for 40 years. He hadn't been ruthless. He'd been bad at math. Marcus Bell doesn't work at the hospital anymore. He works at Foster Meridian, not as a symbol. Vivian had to fight him for 3 weeks to get him to take the interview, and Marcus only agreed after reading the job description 4 times to make sure it was real work. He runs tenant advocacy. 6 cities, he reviews the hardship cases. He's the one who decides. Night school, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Respiratory therapy. 2 more years. Simone taped a pink sticky note to the inside of his front door at exactly the height of a deadbolt. It's been there 11 months. He has never taken it down. It says in purple marker, "Daddy, you are the wall." But we can hold it too. And on Sunday mornings, in the community room of 1847 Kensington Avenue, there are pancakes. It started with 4 men. Now it's 19. Single fathers, most of them. A grandfather raising 2. An uncle who took in his sister's kids. They bring their daughters and sit in folding chairs with combs and edge brushes and a laptop, playing a YouTube video at half speed, and they learn. Marcus runs it. He's the best of them now, and he is insufferable about it. Andre Bell, 6 years old, is in charge of pancakes. He is not good at pancakes. Nobody has told him. And every third Sunday, a billionaire sits in a folding chair in the back with a paper plate balanced on her knee and doesn't say much. The first time she came, one of the men asked Marcus quietly whether it was all right. A woman in here on a Sunday. She's not here to teach us, Marcus said, not looking up from his daughter's hair. She's here to watch us do something she doesn't know how to do. Let her sit. She's not there as a guest. She asked to come. Marcus made her ask twice. If you're still with us, then you're in this room too now. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell us in the comments which moment hit hardest. The braid, the bread, or the lock. Recorded Dad Stories. The Open Door Initiative launched that spring. $60 million of Vivian's own money. And she did not put her name on it. She put Marcus's name on the board instead. And Odessa Harmon's. At the launch, they made Vivian speak. I want to be clear about something, she said. I did not save this family. I evicted this family. I built the machine that did it, and then I got a nice feeling in my chest when I undid one of the 847 things it did. She looked out at the room. That's not redemption. That's just arithmetic. My father told me sentiment was a luxury landlords can't afford. He was wrong, but not the way you think. The problem was never that the system had no heart. Systems don't have hearts. That's what systems are. The problem was that I built one that couldn't see. It couldn't tell the difference between a man who won't pay and a man who can't. This month, one time, in a bad February, after 58 months of never missing once, you can't ask a machine to care, but you can build one that can see people. She stepped back from the microphone. Then she stepped forward again. One more thing. There's a kid named Devon in a shelter on Franklin Street. He's 9. His father works nights. I'm not going to tell you his story, because it's his, not mine. But somebody in this room owns the building he got put out of. Go look at your files. That night, Vivian Foster went home to the penthouse. The housekeeper had set 2 places, clean fork, folded napkin, water glass filled to exactly the same height as her own. She looked at the empty chair for a long moment. 28 years ago, a man had put his hand on her shoulder in a stairwell and taught her she'd have to be twice as hard, or they'd eat her. She had believed him. She had built $2.6 billion on believing him. And it had taken a father in a church basement braiding his daughter's hair off a phone at 1 in the morning to show her that her own father had never once been strong. He'd just been afraid. And he'd taught her to be afraid in a way that looked like power. Vivian walked to the console table by the window, where a silver-framed photograph of Aldridge Foster had stood for 7 years, facing the room. She picked it up. She didn't smash it. She didn't throw it. She didn't say anything to it because there was nobody there to say anything to. She just turned it face down on the table. And on the back of the frame, in black marker, in handwriting nobody would ever see but her, she wrote 3 words. You were wrong. Then she sat down at the 14-seat table, and for the first time in 7 years, she asked the housekeeper to take the second setting away. A note before you go. Every day in the United States, roughly 2,000 families are evicted from their homes. Most are not people who refuse to pay. They're people who paid, and paid, and paid. For months, for years, and then hit one bad week. One hospital bill, one car that didn't start, one February. And single fathers are among the least served people in the housing safety net. Most family shelters are built for mothers and children. In many cities, a man with 2 kids and nowhere to go is told he can have a bed, but his children cannot come with him. He'll sleep in a car instead, so they can stay together. That is not a rare story. That is a Tuesday. If you're facing eviction, or you know someone who is, call 211. It's free, it's confidential, and it connects you to emergency rental assistance in your area. Many people who call find out money exists for them that they never knew about. Call before you're out. Call while you still have the door. Thank you for watching Recorded Dad Stories.